The Russian and Turkish presidents have agreed to create a demilitarized zone in Idlib. The province is the last remaining terrorist stronghold in Syria.
We decided to create along the battle line a demilitarized zone by October 15. It will be from 15 to 20 kilometers wide. We will move radicalized militants out of this zone, including Jabhat al-Nusra.
Our correspondent Medina Kochanova has the latest.
Very important decisions were indeed made during this hours-long talks between Russia and Turkey. Now, the de-escalation zone was hanging in the air during the negotiations, but the two leaders seem to disagree all the way through. That's why this particular agreement, which was voiced at the press conference, came as a surprise to so many. Now, both sides agreed to create a demilitarized zone between militants and government troops of around 15 to 20 kilometers by the 15th of October. And also during the press conference, the Turkish president said that together with Russia, they will eradicate terrorism in the region.
Together with Russia, we will make maximum effort to get rid of all radical groups from this territory. Turkey and Russia will both patrol this territory to ensure compliance.
Right after the talks, Russia's defense minister announced that there's going to be no military offensive on Idlib. He also added that all the details of the agreement, which was reached today, will be discussed with the Syrian government very soon during the upcoming talks. The situation in the province of Idlib has been a crucial topic of discussions for weeks on the international stage between Syria, Russia, Turkey, the US and Iran. So now this decision is surely important as it eases the threat of escalation on the ground.
Joshua Landis is director of the Center of Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. Good to have you on, Joshua. Was this a surprise, moving away from using brute force to get rid of the militants, something Russia had said it was considering doing? Instead, we've got this demilitarized zone. Are you surprised?
Yes, I am surprised. We did hear earlier from Erdogan saying that his policy was paying off of trying to play for time. So we had some indications that a deal might be struck, but it still seems extremely difficult because there are tens of thousands of really fairly hard-bitten jihadist fighters in this area. And they still haven't agreed to back away from this 20-kilometer demilitarized zone. They're going to be the real squeaking point here. So the ball is really put into the court of Hayat Tahrir Sham. That's the al-Nusra group, the al-Qaeda affiliated groups, to deliver to the Turks. And the Turks will have to put the screws to them and let them know that if they don't withdraw, they're not going to be protected in any way. So this is going to be a really difficult decision for those jihadist groups to make.
What would you estimate is Russia's thinking behind this? What's the motivation for heading in this direction?
Well, I think there are several motivations. One is that the world had really ratcheted up the humanitarian anxiety over this, pointing out that there could be a terrible, human toll, that there are 3 million people in this small little province, that they could be driven out and killed in masses. So Russia gets to show its humanitarian face, say, look, we're worried about this. We're not recalcitrant. We're working with all the different European powers. We're trying to find a solution. At the same time, there are some strategic advances for Russia in this. 20 kilometers is no joking matter in a small province like this. It dislodges some very hard-bitten jihadist groups from areas that they've dug tunnels in, that they've really built defenses in. If they pull out 20 kilometers away from the border with the Syrian army, that'll be an important win. And Russia will want to follow this up with further agreements later on down the line. It really forces Turkey to put pressure on these rebel groups.
Joshua, you mentioned the humanitarian element of this. We've seen in the past reports that the terrorists, when there have been humanitarian corridors, that the terrorists have stopped the civilians from leaving through them. Presumably, that's because if all the civilians leave, it leaves the terrorists completely exposed. Do you think that this this demilitarized zone now will be any more effective in allowing civilians to escape?
Yes, it will. It'll provide a zone where civilians can go to, because it'll have Russian and Turkish policemen there, so that many civilians will feel reassured. The rebels and extremists will not be there, so they can't shoot them or stop them if they infiltrate into this region. Now, that won't stop the extremists from punishing people before they get to that zone. And we saw most recently when de Mistura, the UN envoy for Syria, said that he would go to Syria personally with a team in order to construct humanitarian corridors so that civilians could leave into Syria and get protection from this onslaught that might be coming. And all of the radical jihadist groups said no. They cannot do that for the reasons that you pointed out, which would make them very vulnerable. And they started setting up gallows where people who violated and talked to the regime were accused of being traitors, and the rebels said that they would hang them. So that could still go on, even if there is this deal.
Is it as simple as it sounds? Create this zone, it will stop the conflicts between the government forces and those who oppose them, or is it possible the conflict will simply migrate elsewhere?
You know, we don't know. This sounds good, and everybody is trying to take, take not the blame, the opposite of the blame. They're trying to get responsibility for being the good guy in this, but it's going to be very difficult to carry out this buffer zone and to get the rebel groups to move away from 20 kilometers of the border. And there are some very hard-bitten groups. For example, the Uyghur Turkmen who are stationed near Latakia will have to move from their villages that they've occupied with their families and move inland further towards Idlib. So there are some very tough groups that are going to have to sign in onto this. And we don't know how long this is going to really delay fighting in the province.
What do you make of this decision just in terms of the relations between Turkey and Russia? It doesn't seem that long ago that Russia was facing a situation where I think it was Turkey shot down one of their jets, and now we've got them brokering an agreement like this. How do you look at the relations between the country?
Well, you're absolutely right. There has been a 180-degree shift by Turkey, and I think once Turkey shot down that jet that had come into Turkish territory just by a few, little inches, really. And then NATO did not back up Turkey. Turkey realized that they were all alone facing Russia, and Russia put on stiff sanctions. There are $30 billion worth of business done between Turkey and Russia every year. So Turkey felt very exposed. Erdogan realized he wasn't going to get European backing, and he decided, okay, I have to make a deal with Russia. And since then, we've seen improving relations between Turkey and Russia on this point. And so it's not easy. There are still many differences between Russia and Turkey, but it's really, it's ended up at a point where there does seem to be some constructive deal-making, and that's what Syria has really suffered from a lack of over the last 7 years.
The United States has a role in what's happening in Syria, an interest in what's happening in the country. How do you think the US officials will view this announcement?
I think they'll see it as a win. President Trump went on Twitter and said, don't do it. And any kind of a rash decision to invade Idlib, especially one that could kill hundreds of thousands of people, would be terrible. And so America had ratcheted up the rhetoric for both Russia and Turkey. And America's going to see this as good for America. It contains the radicals inside Idlib province. In other words, they're not scattered. They don't have to run away into Anatolia and possibly Europe into the west. So they're contained. And it weakens the radicals. It's forced Turkey to crack down on them. And that's good for America. America does not like these jihadists. Brett McGurk, who's the head of the anti-ISIS coalition in Syria and Iraq, said this is the biggest collection of al-Qaeda since 9/11. So America wants them dead, but it doesn't want Syria to come out a winner, and it doesn't want the humanitarian crisis. So in many ways, this also suits the United States. It helps their outcome. It slows down an invasion, but it keeps it contained to Idlib.
For all of the reasons that you have explained, this seems like it's a great solution for everybody except perhaps the terrorists. Does this just put the conflict on pause? And what would you anticipate will happen next, if it's possible to anticipate?
Well, it does put it on pause. And that's, that's only if the rebels agree to move back. But if they don't move back, Turkey's going to have to take action. And then there's the next problem. Even if they do move back, Syria and President Assad have said in no uncertain terms that he is committed and the Syrian government is committed to taking back every inch of Syrian territory. And President Putin has backed up Assad in this. And he, in his UN statement in 2015, when Russia got involved in Syria, he said in no uncertain terms, all of these rebel groups are illegal and should be seen as terrorists by the international community because were not invited into Syria. They shouldn't be attacking, and foreign powers should not be arming these insurgents to go into a sovereign country and overthrow the government. So Russia also has backed up Assad in saying that Syria should be integral. It should, and Assad and the Syrian army should control all of Syrian territory. So this only delays the problem of what to do with all these rebel groups that own a big chunk of Syria.